Hi everyone, Vector Podcast is here from Berlin Buzzwords 2026, and I'm here accompanied by Charlie Howe. We've worked together before. We continue to interacting. I keep following what you do. Welcome to the show. I think it's the first time we record together.
It is, mysteriously. We've known each other for a long time, but this is the first time I've been on the Vector podcast. So yeah, great.
Long overdue. Now it's time. So you've been here. It's the second day of the conference. How do you find it so far? What are the learnings? What did you hear? What's new? What's all the, anything in between?
Yeah, I think it's always a fantastic event. There's probably, I think, the biggest gathering of search-related folks annually now, because it is quite a big conference. So I use this really as an opportunity to catch up with old friends, old ex-colleagues, people I work with, various partners I have. But also to keep my finger on the pulse of maybe what's coming next in search, new developments, things people have worked out. And I think that maybe the big theme this year for me is obviously we have the rise of AI agents and the idea that search has a new user now. It's not just a person typing a couple of words in a query, but it's an agent carrying out a complex multi-step loop of searches. And really, we're all asking ourselves, how can the technology stand up to that load? How do search engines need to change to deal with the new kind of user who's going to be an agent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yesterday you ran the panel with us about the role of search in this modern AI world. And you asked a question around like how we felt, when we touched AI for the first time, maybe, and how we continuously feel. What about yourself? Like, what was your first encounter? Do you still remember what was going on through your mind? Is this?
Yeah, and I think it was probably sort of 2 or 3 years ago, and we had vector search turning up, and a lot of people were, the maximalists for AI were saying, well, we won't need a search engine anymore. Everything's going to be AI. It'll be an LLM that can do everything. Context windows will keep growing and growing and growing. We'll just dump everything we have into a context window and everything will magically work. So, and this is a question I asked yesterday on the panel. Did people like me feel a little scared and a little intimidated and maybe a bit worried that their jobs as search people would kind of melt away? And I think people did feel that at the time, but maybe after a little reflection, we're now realizing that there's still this need for search expertise because, again, we have this different AI workloads. A lot of, even if you come to a conference like this and you see what amazing new things are happening, what the cutting edge is, there's a lot of people running old systems that need a lot of improvement. So no, the need for that hasn't really gone away. I think the counterpoint, of course, is these AI developments have brought us a whole sheaf of new tools to use, and that's very exciting. We can now use AI tools to understand the query better, to understand the context of the query. We can expand the query to get more recall. We can summarize results into a single answer. Mm-hmm. So we suddenly have this new brace of tools. And I think that's the more positive way of looking at this. We're not going to be replaced by AI. Mm-hmm. We now have some new challenges. It's all very exciting, but we also have these tools that will help us solve some of those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I remember like 2 years ago when we met at Berlin Buzzwords, you've been raising this question, like in our private conversations, how we can make sure that search stays around. So it felt like 2 years ago, it was on top of your mind and it was more like, some new uncharted territory, right? But now do you feel like more comfortable or is it still mysterious in some ways?
I think I do feel more comfortable. I think any of us, even those who've been in this business a long time, have had to take some time to get our heads around these new technologies, learn to use the new tools, learn to use some of the new platforms that have appeared. Pretty much every consulting engagement I go into, I'm asked about vector search.
Yeah.
And how we can mix keyword search results with vector search results, do hybrid stuff. Mm-hmm. But a lot of my clients are still struggling with this because maybe they don't trust the results from vector search or they haven't had a chance to tune it or evaluate it correctly. And so again, I think that we're moving on. We're getting to a better place with a lot of this. Solutions are being found for this problem. Um, but yeah, we're all learning all the time. And even after doing this a long time, I need to, I always have imposter syndrome. I'm always unsure whether I really get something.
Yeah.
And the only way to get past that is to just keep asking stupid questions until you eventually understand it.
Yeah.
Which is again the great thing about this conference, because there's a lot of experts here to ask and some fantastic talks that give you some of those answers.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, you continue, and that's a skill, by the way. It's a real skill to continue to be curious in any new situation, right? Like this one. Yes, and like I want to use the opportunity also to ask about the same questions you asked us at the panel. So one of them is, what is one of the old-time techniques, let's say pre-LLM, that you think is overlooked and should be really used and as a boost for the relevancy or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing that's happened recently is people are rediscovering, BM25. And evaluating some of these more modern approaches against that, which is fascinating. None of these techniques have gone away. They're still useful. And again, they're based on decades of information retrieval research. So we can't just discard them willy-nilly. So if I was going to pick maybe one thing that I think isn't often covered. So, I mean, one of the things I like to play with is spelling selection, using Levenstein distance algorithms to try and correct, because people do misspell queries, and then product data or source data often has misspellings in.
Yeah.
And if you use an AI solution there, it won't always work because the misspelled version may just not be in the training data.
Yeah.
So an AI can't tell you that this misspelled word should actually be this correctly spelled word. But the spelling suggestion technology is a very well-evolved thing. You can quite easily get something to correct typos for you automatically, and basically suggest things that it knows about because they're in the standard inverted index.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we assume that AI tools can do everything, but there's still some of these old things that they struggle with. So that maybe just one example.
Yeah. Yeah. In my experience, I also tried a few things. I would, like, everyone would think that LLMs should be able to handle typos, but actually, surprisingly, they don't. Like in some cases, in casing, let's say, if it's not a typo, it's a casing difference. They actually tend to bring different results, or maybe differently ordered, and therefore there is still place for.
Yeah.
It seems so.
Yeah, and there's also the explainability gap. I mean, with an inverted index, you can directly look within the data structure and see what the tokens are, what the machines turned your source data into, which isn't the same thing. People often miss that. And you can dive really deep and figure out, exactly why something has or hasn't matched. With an LLM, it's far more opaque. You can't really see what the things are within the language model. So I think that's a massive problem when you're trying to debug some of these systems, because weird things will turn up and you've got no idea why. It's very hard to figure out how to stop that happening.
Yeah. And conversely, and maybe a bit broadly, how your life changed with LLMs, if you may share a bit, and also obviously when it comes to search engine development, is there any technique that you found particularly enticing or useful?
Yeah, well, there's kind of a two-part answer to that. I mean, firstly, a lot of the people I work with, again, are struggling with search relevance. Their search engines aren't giving their users the results they need. And often this is a long-standing problem. It's a system that maybe evolved over 10, 15 years, and it's just become too complex to work with, or people have left the company, or they're struggling with how to measure search quality.
Yeah.
So often I'm dealing with people that are still at the very beginning, and they've heard of vector search, they've heard of AI.
Yeah.
They're being pressured maybe from above to implement these things because it's the cutting edge.
Yeah.
But they're still struggling with old problems. So I think that's still a very common experience to me, helping people with the very basics of how to create a reliable, repeatable process for improving search quality. using just plain old keywords. But some of my clients as well are, they're doing vector embeddings as an attempt to fill some of these gaps, to increase recall, to give a wider range of possible results. But the trouble is very often this is done just like with the kind of out of the box technique. Where are we going to get embeddings? Oh, we'll just use OpenAI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I help them to think about, well, is that the appropriate way to do things? Do you know that your LLM basically adequately understands the world you're operating in? Mm-hmm. So if you sell groceries, for example, there's a particular language that's used, there's particular relations, there's a particular model of the world. Mm-hmm. And a generic language model trained on, lots of web data, for example, may not have the same contextual understanding. And so the embeddings may not be quite as good as you think. Uh-huh. But then it comes down to, well, how are you going to evaluate this? How are you going to tell if one's going to give you better results than the other? Mm-hmm. So for me, again, it's often about process, testing, evaluation, and rather than just either blindly trusting technology or not having that deep understanding or even ability to explain what it's actually doing. Yeah. So I think that that's been a change. It's creeping in, but very often some of my clients will get their vector search results and kind of down boost them a bit because they're not entirely sure they trust them. But I think, again, what I'm looking forward to is applying some of these AI techniques for things like query understanding, where we really can begin to gather a lot more of the information we need to answer the user's question. But yeah, practically, is that happening with my clients? Well, for some it is, for some it isn't. They're still wrestling with some of the basic challenges.
So even like without LLM, boom, this topic of query understanding is a known one, right? It has been there for ages, but it seems like we haven't reached, even with LLM help, we didn't reach that point when now all of a sudden all of us can do query understanding, because it's still a complex topic, it seems.
It is, and very often fixed with rule-based systems. But I think that whole area where you don't need to handle every search query the same way, mm-hmm. You can use query understanding to get an idea what the user intent is, and you can then route into different paths of processing depending on how you want to handle that kind of query. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is something that AI tools can really help with. Whereas previously we'd have to create these rule-based frameworks, or we do this thing for a 2-word query. We'd do this if we recognize an entity in a query, but it was all pretty home-built. Yeah. We've got much more useful tools for doing that these days, I think.
Yeah. So if I take a little bit of a tangent here, and still somewhat close to the questions you asked us, I saw like two sides of the spectrum. One is people are way ahead of the curve. They're already doing like inference and optimizing inference and all that, playing the role in this new economy of transitioning from training to inference. And on the other side of the spectrum are companies that haven't even tried vector search at all. They don't even know what vectors are. Like, what is your take and kind of what's your recommendation to these companies, to these players that they understand they're probably behind the curve in a way, but at the same time, they cannot burn the budget on like vectorizing the, few billion document database because it just goes and breaks their bank. And they don't even know if it will work in the first place. Like you said, right? Will it work? So like, what's your approach there?
I think you've got to come back and focus on the use case. There are several ways the kind of AI conversation starts in companies. An executive goes to reads Forbes magazine and reads an article about AI, which amusingly they're always illustrated by a picture of a female android for some reason. But, and they get very excited, and they don't really understand how their search engine works at the moment, but they think they're sure AI could help. So this directive comes down from on high. We're going to do AI.
Right.
An entire AI team is created. They hire lots of expensive ML researchers, and off they go. No one has actually asked, what is the problem this is going to solve?
Right.
So I think that happens a lot. Or people, they have an existing search platform and these new features appear in their latest release, and they say, oh, we can try and take advantage of that. So that's maybe a more engineering-led direction. But again, engineers like playing with new toys. People aren't asking what's the question, what's the problem we're trying to solve here.
Right.
and why is AI the answer?
Mhm.
Because there is associated cost. Possibly, I've seen costs, many multiples of the existing infrastructure and ops cost, just because suddenly you're calculating a billion vectors. You're potentially relying on a third party. You might be, using an API from one of the big, AI players.
Yeah.
So you've got token costs there. You've got stability of that API. So maybe they change something.
Yeah.
Maybe they, triple their prices overnight.
They go away.
They go away. They disappear. Yeah. We've got the availability of people, and there aren't that many good people in any field, and in AI now these people are commanding ridiculous salaries. So if you're a smaller company, you may struggle to hire anyone who's got a clue. Absolutely. And then if you do hire them, you're then dependent on the one guy who understands the AI.
Yeah, bus factor one.
Yes, and that's not great. So, and I think I come back with my clients is, educate yourself what is coming, but don't just leap into the unknown and assume that this new technology will fix all your problems. Your problems are often, again, far more about people and process and measurement than they are about the actual search technology. So I think that's, you got to be careful before you dive in. Keep learning all the time, keep aware of what's going on, understand the landscape, understand the technology landscape, know what's coming next, but don't just dive into it without thinking very carefully about the problem to solve, the use cases it will enable. That I think is something we often forget.
Yeah, that's really basically asking the hard questions, which, by the way, is at the core of Vector Podcast, asking the question of why, right? Like, why are you doing this? Yeah. And sometimes it sounds so confronting and like, why the hell you are even asking this? I'm doing open source, right? It's great.
Yeah.
But like asking this question tends to provoke more thoughts, I guess, and actually make your journey more meaningful. So thanks for doing this. I think you're raising the awareness there. Perhaps on another tangent, like where people can learn together with you. I know you're creating different meetups. You're very active on the search scene in the first place, right? It's a pleasure to follow your blog, your public speaking. But is there something that's coming up that you would like to kind of like users and listeners to know about?
Well, I like getting people together. So I've run conferences for years. I ran the Haystack conference for 5 years when I was at Open Source Connections, and I run the London Search and AI Meetup. I also have a website, searchmeetups.com, which lists all the search meetups across the world, and there's a Google map. And I have a list of search events. You can find all of these on the Search Juggler website. But particularly, what I've been doing recently, obviously I've not lost the habit of running search conferences, but I've been working with the Vespa team to run the very first Vespa conference. Yeah. So Vespa's, a hugely scalable, powerful engine, but it's relatively unknown within the search community. And so what we're trying to do is build up that Vespa users community by holding the first live conference. And this will be in London on September the 10th. And there'll be training from the Vespa team available on the 9th, the day before. And we've got other events associated around that. So I'm really excited about doing this because it will, again, bring people together to learn from each other. Yeah. We've got some great experts like, Trade Ranger and Doug Turnbull coming in. We've got people like Etsy and Walmart who are big Vespa users, which may surprise people. Some of these big companies are using Vespa, but it's going to be a great day. If you look at Vespa AI Live, is the name of the event. And if you Google Vespa AI Live, you'll find the details. And yeah, we're keeping it cheap, we're keeping it simple, we're keeping it small and community-based. So I'm really looking forward to running that.
Yeah, what I love, and I do wear the Ivan shirt right now, but what I love is that you guys, Doug Turnbull, Trade Ranger, yourself, Charlie, you sit at the level when you can connect us all for like a really meaningful goal, right? Be it a course or a book or a live event where we can learn things. So I think this is really fantastic that you are doing this. So keep doing that. Maybe I want to ask it as a way to wrap up. I wanted to ask you, like I've spoken to many makers during these 2 days, right? Some of them are like hyped and excited. Some of them, oh, I've seen this before. Some of them even look a little bit like tired, like battling through their days. So I just wonder, what would be your message to this crowd to continue being inspired, to continue push the field forward, however gigantic sometimes and really like hard it feels, but like because there is a cause, there is something that we're trying to solve as a community.
Yes, well, and I think what we do really is search people is, we're connecting people with information. That's the kind of core thing we're doing. And we're doing that for, for reasons to, I mean, sometimes it's purely commercial to sell things to people. Sometimes it's to enable, conversations and to, people can keep up with the news or they can find out about medical issues or whatever. I think so to carry on doing that, we need to constantly evolve how we develop these technologies. But a lot of it is about sharing knowledge for me. And that's why I like running events. I like coming to things like Berlin Buzzwords, because there's a community of people who love talking about the same things I do. And I want more people to get into them. So I think search is exciting. Search is a fantastic field that crosses so many different disciplines. And I want other people to get as excited about it as I do. Now, it can be tiring when there's a fire hose of, at the moment, AI-related news.
Yeah.
But most things in life go in cycles. At the moment, we're in that kind of exciting boom times where if you're not on the train, you're missing out. You've got to keep up with all the new models announced every 5 minutes. But this will pass, and there'll be a change, and something else will pop up. And I think there's the risk that some of the initial enthusiasm about AI, people are throwing billions at new data centers. Let's not forget the carbon cost, but eventually we'll settle down again. It'll kind of flatten out a bit, and we'll get more realistic treatments of these things. So, pardon me, we need to maybe ride the wave for a little longer. But yeah, stay curious, stay keep finding out, and talk to people, meet people, connect with people, because we can do this together.
Yeah.
You're not alone in this journey. There's other people. The people that you think are the experts who know everything.
Yeah.
And you'll never know as much as them. Trust me when I say, even those of us who are maybe have been doing this long enough to be considered experts, which is very kind, we are also struggling sometimes keeping up.
Yeah.
You can only learn so much. You can only keep up with so much.
Absolutely.
So, do what you can, ride the wave, keep connecting with people, and keep listening and learning. And it'll turn out all right in the end.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Keep doing this, and I think like you really struck a chord there that you are not alone, and because we come here to exchange and to even ask how are you doing, like what keeps you up at night, and maybe exchange and help each other, and maybe just a little bit opposite to that, where we wrap up is, do you think there is something fundamentally missing in how we have been doing things? Or maybe everything is fine and we just need to continue doing the way we're doing? Or maybe there are some tough problems we're avoiding, or,
I think one of the things, I had a chat to somebody earlier this week who is a technologist from India. And one of the things he does outside his technology job is he works a lot with blind and partially sighted people. So he runs blind football teams. He helps educate blind people and get blind people employment. Apparently it's a huge challenge in India in particular. Now, we ended up talking about accessibility. And one of the things that seems to be a constant problem with search and language-related technologies is that a certain amount of languages are very well covered. So English, for example, and then we have the European languages, the major European languages. And then as you go further out, into Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, whatever, there's less coverage because the work hasn't been put in. Now, what about the people who speak quite a rare language? Somewhere in the middle of South America or the middle of Africa or whatever, where there has been no research, no work's gone into. Are we marginalizing those people? So I think that's a facet of accessibility of technology that we don't often think about. Now, if you're doing all your work to develop a language model for English, what happens to the people who just don't speak English? It's not their first language. Are you marginalizing people unintentionally by not thinking about these other areas? So I think we need to have a more international focus. We need to think that, are we delivering benefits just to the rich West?
Yeah,
Or are we?
self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah. So I'd love people to put, especially maybe a volunteer effort in the open source community is very good at this, but to think about those people we're not reaching, the people who will not be able to take advantage of this
Yeah, that's
stuff
amazing.
because they simply, aren't going to be able to communicate in the same way. And that I think is an untapped area, something that I'd like to see a lot more discussion about, and figure out ways, maybe AI can help,
Yeah,
but figure out ways where we can help those groups that are marginalized through no fault of their own, just because they don't speak the language we
yeah.
do.
At least AI will not think by itself about these things, right? Unless we are still in the era of prompting AI. In other words, we take the lead, right?
Yes.
At least let's continue doing that.
It's still under our control, at least for the minute. For the moment, yes.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really like excited chatting to you and also like following your work. Where our listeners can, follow like your blog or where you're mostly present online.
Yeah, so at the moment, I have a blog. If you look at thesearchjuggler.com, that's my website. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, and in a few of the forums. We have relevant Slack as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeps growing.
Which keeps going on. It was last time I looked, it was over 5,500 people.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'm not so active in some of the social channels anymore because, well, you can probably guess which one I'm referring to. I'm not really comfortable posting on anymore. But if you go to my website, you can find out ways to contact me. But and also, if there's a search conference, I'll probably be there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah. Thank you so much, Charlie. Really enjoying your work and stay inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.